Good morning and welcome to yet another video from the Smart CA initiative. My name is CA Sripriya Kumar and this video is in relation to bank audit for the year ended March 31st, 2021 and specifically deals with the aspect of restructuring of MSME loan and borrower accounts which would have been undertaken by the banks. And in doing this video, I must place on record my sincere appreciation to CA Sundararajan of SRBR Associates Chennai, who's also authored books on the bank audit and a very prominent member of the CA study circle in Chennai. I'm very thankful for his guidance and inputs which have helped me to better my understanding. And it's been a sheer delight to do this video and I hope you enjoy it too. And if you have any feedback on this video, you may write to me on sripriya@spka.in. I repeat, sripriya@spka.in. So what's this MSME restructuring all about? The restructuring of MSME accounts is permitted by RBI and it's been permitted through several notifications which have come since 2018. Now, an MSME account which meets the criteria specified in these notifications is allowed for restructuring. So what's restructuring? It means basically giving the borrower more concessions and more time to repay his loan. And it may feature as an interest reduction or an extension of the repayment period or lowering of the installments. So any change that you make to the parent terms and conditions of the loan which gives the borrower an additional flexibility or an additional concession is a restructuring. In the normal course, just visualize this. There is a borrower who says, I can't pay. So you restructure his account. But it's an inability to pay that has driven the restructuring, so it actually gets downgraded. But when a restructuring is done pursuant to these RBI notifications, it's retained as a standard asset, which means it does not call for provisioning beyond what is stated in these circulars notifications. So a bank gets benefited because there is no hit to the P&L account because of this provision. Now, all the conditions which are prescribed in these notifications must be ensured to permit restructuring. The restructuring results in an account being classified or continued to be classified as standard in the books of the bank. And the concept of MSME restructuring is not new. It's not just because of COVID. It started way back when GST was implemented and MSMEs were fraught with difficulties. And so we go on to what are these notifications? So the MSME related notifications, if you go to the RBI website and Google for these dates or these circular references, you will find these. There were notifications which were issued in February 2018, June 2018, January 2019, February 2020, and August 2020. But all of them in some way linked to the original notifications which were issued earlier. And they were permissible. The restructuring was permissible if the accounts were standard on the dates which are specified in this slide, which is accounts which were standard as of August 31 could be taken for restructuring per the February 2018 circular. Similarly, standard assets as of March 21, 2020, which was pre-COVID, could be considered for MSME restructuring on August 6, 2020 circular. So, and the implementation dates for these circulars have also been specified. So today, if you go to a branch, if the implementation has been completed as of March 31, 2021, and the conditions that I will describe in my later part of the presentation are fulfilled, then such restructuring results in the asset being a standard asset. See, somebody can go ahead and restructure. It's within the rights of the bank. But the asset quality gets downgraded if such restructuring is not in pursuant to this or it's because of a COVID notification. Now, this presentation does not deal with the COVID notifications but deals only with MSME restructuring. Now, very specifically, we will go through three important notifications which are likely to impact our audit period itself. So just for reference, as a reference point, I am also going to take up the January 1, 2019 notification. We'll speak about February 11th notification 2020 and August 6, 2020 notification, which permits restructuring of MSME accounts to be completed before March 31, 2021. So in terms of our audit period timing 2021, the two circulars of February and August 2020 would be more relevant. Now, why am I also going to talk about the other circulars? Primarily because some of the aspects of those circulars also get carried forward into these circulars. So when you go to the RBI website, it will refer to the earlier circular. So please click that circular also. Now, I've also made a Word document which encompasses all the 5 notifications which are tabulated one against the other, and you may write to me for a mail copy of this. So first, let's take accounts. You're going for the audit and you find that your bank tells you that an account has been restructured. As at March 31st, it's been restructured. Any date prior to, on, or implemented on March 31, 2021. So that's your first immediate point, right? You'll ask what are the accounts that have been restructured during the year. Now, for such accounts which have been restructured, where there is a specific pointed question in the LFAR, the new LFAR also, the following conditions must be satisfied. Only MSME registered enterprises are entitled to this benefit. So as an auditor, you can request for a registered enterprise. So it basically uses the term MSME. It doesn't really use the term registration, but you must look at the bank's policy, the bank's board policy, which is also specified later to see how they define an MSME, and that should be aligned to the law. The second, the aggregate exposure, including non-fund based facilities of banks and NBFCs to the borrower. So it's not just does not exceed 25 crores. So you don't look at only your bank. Suppose I'm auditing Indian Bank. It's not just Indian Bank's exposure to the MSME, but the MSME in total should not have an exposure exceeding 25 crores from all banks and NBFCs from whom they have availed credit facilities, whether as loans or CCODs, and it should not exceed 25 crores as of March 1, 2020. The borrower's account should have been a standard asset as on March 1, 2020. Very interestingly, in this notification, they do not use the term and in default. It only says it should have been a standard asset. The entity should be GST registered or exempted from GST registration. So you can't have a very high turnover and falling within the registrable category and not being registered. Why? Because the genesis of all these notifications was the fact that because of GST, I had a concern. Asset may be classified as standard on the date of restructuring. So suppose I've restructured on February 18, 2021, I call it as a standard asset on that date. Additional provisions of 5% over and above the provisions held should be maintained in the books. And it very specifically also says all instructions in the earlier circular dated February 11, 2020 shall remain applicable. So that's my immediate reference point. I've taken a loan which has been restructured after, let's say, August 6th and up to March 31st, 2021. Then I look for these conditions. Now, in addition to these conditions, I also look for what was stated in the February 11th circular. So what does the February 11th circular say? It says the same thing. It says restructuring must have been completed before December 31st. So where it's done before December 31st, you look for the February 11, 2020 circular also. Only MSME registered enterprises. Aggregate exposure criteria of 25 crores remains the same. It was a standard asset as on January 1, 2020, and it says in default. This in default is a new term which is not present in the later circular which we just went through. GST registration or exempt continues to be the same. Classifiable as standard from the date of restructuring. And it also says one very important thing. Accounts which have already been restructured in terms of January 1. So I had already given him a benefit through my earlier circular. Cannot be restructured under this circular. Very, very important. So in terms of a carry through, again it says everything as per February 11, 2020 shall be applicable. Correct? But February 11, 2020 circular says if I have already restructured, by the January 1, 2019 circular, then it's ineligible. So you will have to take caution. Why? Because repeated restructuring is not a good thing. It has a very systemic issue with the borrower, which cannot be considered, in providing a benefit of treating such asset as a standard asset. Then we come to the January 19 notification. So if you notice, we went through August, which is the latest. We went to February 11, which was the earlier notification. Now we go to the parent notification, which is January 1, 2019. At this point, I must highlight to you that we also recollect that there were two earlier notifications, which was February 7, 2018 and June 6, 2018, which form part of my Word document, which you can write to me, but I have not brought it here because then the whole thing gets too complicated and it becomes too long a presentation. Now let's come to the January 1, 2019 circular. Now this is very important because a lot of this circular is a far more elaborate circular. It says restructuring must have been completed before March 31st, 2020. So this is the circular which you would have referred when you did the audit for the previous year. Albeit but not at the same branch, it could have been a different branch. Again, this circular I have tried to encapsulate in a far greater detail. MSME enterprises, borrower's account is in default, but it is a standard asset as on January 1, 2019, and it's GST registered or exempted as per the GST law. The restructuring is implemented before March 31st, 2021. Now, why have I brought this here? Because my earlier circular which I spoke about, let's say the circular dated February 2020 or even August 2020, spoke about implementation of the restructuring. So it becomes important to understand what is meant by implementation. That is not defined in that circular, August circular, but it is defined in the earlier circular. A restructuring account would be treated as implemented if the following conditions are met. All related documents. So I'm taking a restructured account as of March 2021. I check for 25 crores. I check for GST. I check for standard as on a particular date which is specified in that notification. I make sure all related documentation, including agreements between lenders, borrower, creation of security charge, perfection, is all completed by the bank, and the new capital structure and or changes in the terms and conditions of the existing loans get duly reflected in the books of the lender and the borrower. So it should get reflected in the books of the lender and the borrower. So if I've given a restructuring as of February 2021, then such should get reflected in the books of the lender and the borrower should have cognized for such restructuring. A provision of 5% in addition to the provision. So they're saying generally, see, I'm giving you this benefit of restructuring. So, but still, RBI says I would still recognize the fact that the asset quality is not very high. So please maintain an additional provision of 5% in addition to the provisions already held. Now, for the accounts which were restructured earlier, the bank will say, oh, we finished the restructuring. Now we are going to upgrade it. And I want to release this 5% provision. So the notification also says, bank will have the option of reversing such provisions. This will be only for cases which have been restructured earlier, subject to the account demonstrating satisfactory performance during the specified period. What is the specified period is defined in this circular. So this is very important. While we are not talking about restructured accounts here, the accounts restructured during this year, we're talking about earlier restructured accounts where the bank wants to release the 5% provision. RBI notification says unless the account borrower has demonstrated satisfactory performance, you cannot release this 5% provision. Specified period is defined here, means a period of 1 year from the commencement of the first payment of interest or principal. So the account should demonstrate satisfactory performance. So let's say I did a restructuring in 2020, let's say March. Now I gave them a 6-month reschedulement. After that September 2020, they should have performed satisfactorily. What is satisfactory performance? Means no payment shall remain overdue for more than 30 days if it's a loan account. In case of cash credit account, outstanding shall not be more than the sanctioned limit or the drawing power, whichever is lower, for a period of more than 30 days. So the law specifically says what is the specified period, what is satisfactory performance. These two are very important for the release of your 5% provisions. The other conditions in the circular which equally apply for the later circulars which were issued. And by the way, I use the term circulars and notifications interchangeably. It's in the RBI website. Post-structuring, the NPA classification shall be as per the extant IRAC norms. Banks and NBFCs shall make appropriate disclosures. So you will be asked to disclose. The bank has to say how many accounts were restructured in the MSME category and what is the value of restructuring. All other instructions applicable shall continue to be applicable. Banks, this is very important. The banks and NBFCs. So the first thing when you do when you're talking about restructuring, you ask them for the bank board approved policy on restructuring of MSME advances under these instructions within a month from the date of issuance of the circular. Please remember, if you're talking about August 2020 circular, I must have a board policy which has come before September. They can't refer to the old board policy. Every time there is a circular, the circular says you need to have a board approved policy. The policy shall include inter alia, framework for viability assessment, etc., etc. So today as an auditor, we have again transcended far beyond what the bank believes. You in the new LFA are supposed to state your views. So if you feel that a restructuring is not in order and the viability assessment has not been done correctly, then please state so in the relevant segment of the new LFAR. Now, an old NPA account can also be restructured. But why? Because in all these circulars, they kept talking about standard assets. But by restructuring an NPA account, that's within the bank's policy, I cannot upgrade my asset quality or reduce my provision. So it's within the bank's rights. No, if somebody is an NPA and he wants more time to pay, if the board approves or whoever, the relevant authorities approve as per the delegated structure of the bank, you can actually do it, but the IRAC norms of classification will apply. There will be a slippage in the account. So the entire gamut of these notifications is basically to prevent the slippage. It says if he's a genuine MSME, he's GST registered and he's been standard as at a particular date and he has not been restructured earlier, please restructure him today. Do not consider him as a non-standard asset, a substandard, doubtful or loss asset. The other parts of the circular reads, as a general rule, this is very, very important. Barring the exception, the one-time exception which is referred to in this circular, any MSME account which is restructured must be downgraded to NPA upon restructuring and will slip into progressively lower and lower asset classification and higher provisioning. Correct? I had an NPA account. I am restructuring that account. I cannot bring it under this circular because the standard asset norms are very, very clear for the dates which are specified in the respective circulars. Again, because again the same reference is there too, and such NPA accounts or any one-time exception accounts which are not covered in this MSME. So RBI, as a matter of abundant caution, says you want to bring anybody which is outside the circular by treating him as an MSME, then the upgrade policy should be only on satisfactory performance during the specified period which is defined here. So with this, I'd like to conclude this presentation. And if you have any queries on this, I'm sure there are lots of people who have people like Sundararajan who will be able to guide. And I'm always available. You may reach out to me by mail on sripriya@spk.in. Thank you very, very much for this patient hearing. And this was a short session on MSME restructuring notifications. Thank you.